What does it actually look like when two human beings reach the absolute, unchallengeable peak of what is physically and emotionally possible? Not in theory. Not in some glossy highlight reel you half-watch at 2 a.m. while doom-scrolling your phone. I mean in the moment. The raw, terrifying, chest-crushing, heart-stopping moment under the most suffocating pressure imaginable. The entire world watching. The lights blazing down, the ice cold and merciless beneath your blades. And absolutely everything you have ever sacrificed on the line. What does perfection look like when the margin for error is literally zero? On February 16th, 2026, inside a packed electric arena in Milan, Italy, Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara gave us the answer. They delivered a moment so profound, so staggering, that it didn't just transcend figure skating. It transcended sport itself. And then just 2 months later, they walked away from everything. Not because their bodies were failing them, not because a new generation was catching up, not because injuries forced their hand or federation politics pushed them out. They walked away because they had nothing left to prove, to the world, or to themselves. They knew it in their bones. This is the story of the duo millions know simply as Riku Ryu. And if you pay close attention, if you really absorb the layers of what they accomplished, you'll realize this might just be the most beautifully complete story in the entire history of modern sports. Put yourself inside that building. It's the Winter Olympics, the pinnacle. The dream that consumes athletes from the moment they're old enough to walk. The pair's short program has just ended. Miura and Kihara, two-time world champions, undisputed fan favorites, the most beloved and decorated pairs Team Japan has ever produced in its entire storied history, are sitting in the kiss and cry. And they're staring at the scoreboard. 5th place. Not first, not second, not even third. 5th, separated from the podium by fractions of a point because of a single mistake on a lift. In pairs skating, a mistake isn't just a bobble. It's not a misstep in a dance routine. It is a heart-stopping rupture of physics, one of those agonizing moments where you can feel the air get sucked out of the entire arena. The collective gasp of thousands of people all at once. History is absolutely ruthless on this point. When a gold medal favorite drops to 5th in the short program at the Olympics, the story is over. The media starts drafting the buckled under pressure narratives. The athletes retreat inward. The doubt creeps in, the whispers start, and partnerships begin to fracture at the edges. But here's exactly what makes this story different from every other sports comeback you've ever watched. They did not panic. They did not fall apart. They did not turn on each other in the locker room. They did not spend the night running calculations about what mathematical miracles they needed from the judges or stress watching footage of their Russian, American, and Canadian competitors. They did something much quieter and infinitely more powerful. They went back to the foundation. They leaned completely on what they had spent 7 grueling, lonely, beautiful years building from scratch. Trust. Unbreakable, unshakable trust. Trust in each other. Trust in their daily process. Trust in the partnership they had painstakingly constructed piece by piece, day by day, fall by fall since 2019. Back when absolutely nobody outside a small circle in Japan even knew their names. And when they took the ice for the free skate a few days later, what followed was not just a great routine. It was a spiritual experience. It was an athletic masterpiece, 158.1, 3 points. A completely shattered world record. A performance of such breathtaking speed, power, synchronization, and emotional depth that the crowd was on its feet long before the final note of music even echoed through the rafters. In one single defining performance, they clawed their way back from the abyss, wiping out the deficit, leaping over 4 world-class teams, and capturing Japan's first ever Olympic pairs gold medal. They didn't just win a competition that night in Milan. They etched their names into the bedrock of figure skating history, permanently. But if you're not deeply immersed in the niche, obsessive world of figure skating, you might be asking a very reasonable question right now. How exactly did we get here? Who are Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara? And why does their triumph mean so much more than a heavy piece of gold hanging around their necks? To understand the magnitude of Milan, you have to understand the sheer improbability of their origin. Riku is 24 years old. Ryuichi Kihara is 33. There is a 9-year age gap between them. In the real world, 9 years is just a number. But in the hyper-specific, dangerous, violently fast world of pairs, skating a 9-year gap is an eternity. Pairs skating is a sport where physical chemistry, joint mechanics, and timing have to be almost telepathic. You are accelerating across solid ice on a millimeter of steel, throwing another human being 20 feet into the air, expecting her to rotate multiple times, and trusting, blindly trusting that she will land backward on one foot without shattering an ankle. You are lifting a woman above your head with one arm while gliding backward at 20 miles per hour. It requires an absolute faith that most couples take decades to develop. Before 2019, Ryuichi Kihara was a veteran who had been through the ringer. He'd skated with other partners. He'd tasted the bitter flavor of mediocrity on the international stage. He'd dealt with severe injuries, concussions, the kind of physical trauma that makes an athlete seriously question why they subject their body to such punishment. He was nearing the end of his 20s, a time when many skaters quietly pack their bags, join a touring show, or transition to coaching. By many accounts, he was almost done. And then there was Riku, a teenager, bursting with raw, unrefined talent, fearless, but without a partner who could match her potential. When they decided to team up in the summer of 2019, it was a gamble, a massive, life-altering roll of the dice. And almost immediately, they made a decision that would define their entire trajectory. They packed up their entire lives, said goodbye to their families, left the comfort of their home culture, and moved halfway across the globe to Oakville, Ontario, Canada, to train under master coach Bruno Marott. Think about the psychological weight of that decision. 7 years living in a country that wasn't theirs, 7 harsh Canadian winters, grappling with a new language, a new culture, intense homesickness away from their parents, away from their friends. And let's not forget, shortly after they relocated, a global pandemic shut the entire world down. They were trapped in isolation, unable to travel back to Japan, spending every waking hour either inside a freezing ice rink or locked in their apartments, chasing a dream that at the very beginning came with absolutely zero guarantees. They could have failed spectacularly. They could have realized they were completely incompatible and wasted the prime years of their youth. But they did not fail. They went to work. They won their first Japan National Championship in December of 2019. It was a statement, a quiet but undeniable signal that something very special, something highly unusual, might be forming on the other side of the Pacific. But the real turning point, the moment the entire global figure skating community was forced to stop and pay attention, came in the 2022-23 season. That season was, for lack of a better word, a slaughter. It was almost unfair to the rest of the world. They entered Skate Canada and won. They went to the NHK Trophy and won. They went to the Grand Prix final, a gathering of only the absolute elite, and won. They competed at the Four Continents Championship and won. And then, in March of 2023, inside the roaring Saitama Super Arena in Japan, fueled by the deafening screams of their home country, they captured the World Championship title, the first ever for a Japanese pairs team in the 100-plus-year history of the sport. They had officially arrived, but they didn't stop there. They came back and won the World Championship again in 2025 inches, Boston, dominating on American soil. Just look at what they built in that window. Silver at Worlds in 2022, gold in 2023, silver in 2024, gold in 2025, and then the ultimate crown, Olympic gold in 2026. This was not a lucky streak. This was not a team catching lightning in a bottle for one magical weekend. This was a bona fide dynasty. Built quietly, methodically, in the shadows of a training rink in Canada, far from the blinding spotlight until their excellence became so undeniable that the spotlight had no choice but to find them. But I want to talk about something deeper, something that doesn't show up on a judge's score sheet and cannot be quantified by technical base values or grades of execution. A lot of pairs teams are technically excellent. A lot of teams can land a throw triple axel or execute a level 4 death spiral. A lot of pairs teams train relentlessly, sacrifice their youth, and compete fiercely at the highest levels. But not all of them have that thing. That invisible, magnetic, visceral quality where you watch them glide across the ice and you feel something tighten in your chest. Something way beyond a casual appreciation for athleticism. You feel their joy. You feel their connection. Ryu had that thing in abundance. They possessed a warmth, a radiant positivity that bled right through the television screen. When they skated, it didn't look like two athletes executing a rehearsed routine for a panel of judges. It looked like two best friends sharing a secret language that only they understood. It looked like pure, unadulterated freedom. And I genuinely believe that magic, that unique aura they projected, came from one very specific place. It came from the way they handled failure. Think again about what it actually means to be sitting in 5th place at the Olympic Games, heading into the most important 4 minutes of your entire existence. That is not normal athletic pressure. That is a specific, suffocating, terrifying kind of pressure where you know deep down in the darkest corners of your mind that this might be your absolute last chance. The door is closing, the window is shutting, and you did not start where you desperately needed to start. Most athletes in that position do one of two things. They either overtry, letting the adrenaline and the panic hijack their nervous system, forcing movements, gripping too tight, and ultimately falling apart completely. Or they surrender to the fear. They water down their routine to avoid embarrassment. They play it safe, and they leave a piece of their soul on the table, settling quietly for mediocrity. Miura and Kihara did neither. When the music started for that fateful free skate in Milan, they skated their program the exact same way they would have skated it if they'd been sitting comfortably in first place with a 10-point lead. They were clean. They were deeply committed to every single edge, and they were fully, gloriously present in the moment. You don't achieve that kind of zen-like focus by accident. You don't fake that under the Olympic rings. That level of grace under fire is the direct result of a partnership built on genuine, profound trust, not just trusting the other person as a mechanical counterpart, but trusting them as a human being. Knowing that if you fall, they will not look at you with disgust. Knowing that if you fail together. And if you fly together. And we cannot talk about this trust without talking about the architect who helped build it. Their coach, Bruno Marott, is a monumental part of this story. He wasn't just a technician, he was a psychologist, a mentor, a father figure away from home. In their retirement statement, Riku and Ryuichi specifically carved out space to honor him. They said he always believed in them even when they didn't believe in themselves, and that he guided them through their darkest days with unrelenting positivity. When athletes thank their coaches in a press release, you can usually tell whether it's polished PR language drafted by an agent or whether they actually mean it from the bottom of their hearts. Riku and Ryuichi meant it. You could see it in the way they embraced him over the boards. Before every single skate, he taught them that they were enough, exactly as they were. On April 17, 2026, the figure skating world came to a sudden, collective halt. Miura and Kihara posted a lengthy retirement announcement on their social media channels. It was accompanied by photos of them smiling, holding their Olympic gold medals, looking utterly at peace. And the thing that struck me most about reading that statement wasn't the gratitude to their fans, their families, and their federation, though there was plenty of that. It was the overwhelming, quiet confidence embedded in every single sentence. They wrote that they truly felt they had given the sport their all, and that they were walking away with absolutely zero regrets. No regrets. I want you to pause and really let that wash over you. How many professional athletes ever genuinely get to say that? How many people in any highly competitive field, business, art, sports, reach the end of a massive chapter in their lives and actually feel complete? Most athletes are haunted by ghosts of what could have been. Tormented by the missed shot, the blown call, the silver that should have been gold. They leave the arena feeling like there's unfinished business, like a chapter was torn out of their book before they could finish writing it. Ryu did not feel that way. They felt like they had explored every single room in the mansion of their potential, painted every wall, filled every last inch of the space the universe gave them. In their statement, they also addressed a question that had been lingering in the press. Why did they skip the 2026 World Championships, held just a month after the Milan Olympics? They revealed a fascinating detail. They had actually planned that decision in secret before the Olympic season even began. They had made a pact with each other. The Olympics was always, fundamentally, going to be their final competitive event. Period. It was the finish line they had drawn in the sand years ago. And after executing the greatest comeback in Olympic history and claiming that gold medal, they understood the reality of their bodies and their minds, restoring their physical condition, and more importantly, their psychological hunger. To championship level in just 3 weeks was simply not realistic. The adrenaline crash after an Olympic high is brutal. But far more importantly than the physical logistics, they simply did not need to go. They didn't need another piece of hardware to validate their existence. They had already scaled the mountain. They had slain the dragon. They had done the impossible thing. The reaction from the global community was immediate and deeply emotional. The International Skating Union posted a tribute simply describing their impact as legendary. On forums and social media, thousands of fans flooded comment sections with messages of love, tears, and overwhelming respect. One comment in a massive retirement thread on Reddit stopped me cold. A fan wrote, "Not many athletes can honestly say they went out on the absolute top. The fact that their final competitive performance on Olympic ice was that epic, that flawless, and that dramatic shows that they poured every last drop of fuel they had left into that one routine." That fan was exactly right. It was the perfect ending to the perfect movie. But here is why this story reaches far beyond the confines of an ice rink, and far beyond the shiny medals collecting dust in a trophy case. Before Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara joined forces, the nation of Japan had never won an Olympic pairs gold medal. Never. Not in the entire 100-year history of the event. Japan has a legendary, obsessive figure skating culture. They have produced some of the greatest single skaters to ever live: Yuzuru Hanyu, Shoma Uno, Kaori Sakamoto. But in pairs skating, Japan was an afterthought, a non-factor. The narrative was that Japanese skaters were too small, or that the country simply didn't have the specialized coaching infrastructure to compete with the state-sponsored machines of Russia, the acrobatic powerhouses of China, or the seasoned veterans of North America. Miura and Kihara didn't just win a gold medal. They completely, irrevocably shattered a geographical and cultural ceiling. They rewrote the entire blueprint of what is considered possible for Japanese figure skating. They took a sledgehammer to the narrative. They proved to the entire world that a Japanese pairs team could not only compete at the top level globally, but could dominate it. And they dominated it for years. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this ending is that Riku and Ryuichi are not disappearing. In their retirement statement, they made a promise they intend to take on new challenges to bring wider recognition, funding, and popularity to pair skating within Japan. Whether that takes the form of coaching the next generation, mentoring young partnerships, choreographing, or working as ambassadors for the sport, one thing is absolutely certain. These two human beings are going to be shaping the destiny of Japanese pairs skating for decades to come. Think about what that means for a 7-year-old girl or boy lacing up their skates in a freezing rink in Hokkaido or Tokyo right now. 10 years ago, if a young Japanese skater wanted to be a champion, they looked at single skating. Pair skating wasn't a realistic dream, it was a phantom. But today, those kids don't have to rely on their imaginations to wonder what's possible. They don't have to look to foreign athletes for inspiration. They watched a Japanese man and a Japanese woman stand on the absolute highest podium in the world, listening to their national anthem with gold draped around their necks. They watched it happen in real time on the biggest stage in all of sports. That is what true legacy is. Medals eventually tarnish, records eventually get broken. But inspiration is immortal. It walks forward into the future, inhabiting the minds and bodies of the next generation. Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara spent 7 exhausting, glorious years away from everything they knew, building a masterpiece the rest of the world thought was unbuildable. They faced devastating setbacks. They endured brutal injuries. They fought through language barriers, a global pandemic, and moments of crippling self-doubt. But they always bounced back. They always held on to each other's hands. They conquered the biggest stages the world had to offer. And then when the moment was absolutely flawless, when the final note of music faded into the roar of a standing ovation in Milan, they stepped off the ice, held their heads high, and walked away with their hearts completely full. In a modern sports landscape where we are so frustratingly accustomed to watching our heroes hang on for far too long, chasing one more season, one more paycheck, one more fading title until their bodies break and their legacies get complicated, Riku Ryu did something quietly, breathtakingly radical. They knew exactly when it was time to stop, and they had the profound courage to stop at the absolute top of the mountain. That is not just a description of a great career. That is the definition of a perfect one.